Thank you. You know what, Jim? Try that microphone because I think it needs to be boosted.
It's on. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
It's a little soft.
Again?
Yes, thank you.
Well, actually, I've got a mask on too. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
I'm gonna pop it up just a little. Do it one more time.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. Sound
Here
good?
we go. Testing. So I'm gonna do that. In the name of all that's complicated, may we enter this week gently. May we welcome all the guests that come to our table, the ambiguity of why bother this year, the joy of celebration and fresh baked pie, the grief of the empty seat that can never be filled, the warmth of candles lit in the dark, the malaise of all that you've been told about how to feed your body, the hope of reconnection, of feeling filled for the first time in maybe a long time, the fear of, is this safe enough? The loving bustle of ancestry and recipe and tradition, the horror of history and all the ways it lives on. May we welcome all these guests at our Thanksgiving table this year and all others who come needing a place to call home. There is good news. There is space here. Plenty of grace to share. In the name of all that is complicated, come let us worship together. Songs because of COVID. We can't do congregational singing, but Billy's doing the singing for us today. Thank you so much. Now I invite Liz and Selden to come up and light our chalice.
Let this flame be to us a symbol of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glow reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace upon all the world. Thank you. Well, good morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, for this 1 hour, you're part of this congregation and you are welcome. We welcome everyone who's here in the sanctuary and we welcome everyone who's joining us from home remotely. We are all one big family here today. We have several, first of all, it is a special service. It's our Thanksgiving service. So let's begin as we've done in the past. By greeting one another, maybe saying Happy Thanksgiving. You're welcome to stand up and move around a bit, just don't touch one another, but we'll make it a very brief greeting so that we won't spread anything from one person to another. So with your masks on, you're welcome to say Happy Thanksgiving. And you folks, can we put gallery on, Dustin, for the folks who are joining us remotely, and unmute them and they can say hello as well.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning,
You
everyone.
have to also unmute yourself, it looks like.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi there, everybody joining us remotely. Happy Thanksgiving.
Morning.
Hope everybody's all set for the holiday. Here's Sarah Moran, our new superstar. Can I have your autograph? Maybe you don't know, Sarah was on the cover of Duxbury, was it Duxbury Neighborhood this week? Great article. Great article. Good to see you all.
I'd like to see that.
Yes, we have a superstar here among us. Sarah Moran was on the cover of one of our local magazines. I hope you saw the article. It was really spectacular.
Somebody save it for me. Sarah, you save it for me.
In addition to being a Thanksgiving service, it is Announcement Sunday, and we have lots of announcements. I want to start with one, and that is, once again, for the 18th year in a row, your minister will be leading the Bumpus Park service on Thanksgiving morning, 7:30 to 8 o'clock. We're unable to have refreshments, but it really is a wonderful service. And since it's outdoors, we can sing. So we invite you to join us, rain or shine. We also are going to have an offering from our diverse music team, and you'll hear about that a little later. And speaking about offerings, we are going to have a collection. Anybody remember these from a Catholic childhood? I know I do. I think Lynn Marples thought I was nuts when I put an invoice in for 2 collection baskets, but we're going to do an offering with these baskets. Let's see how this works. So you'll hear a little more about that later too. Now I'd like to invite Sharon and Sally up to do our raffle, our plastics raffle, and Cindy. Sorry, I left the microphone over here.
Good morning, everybody. We're having the raffle. We started about a month ago doing a plastic challenge. 30-odd people signed up to spend the month thinking about the single-use plastic that they've used and to try to reduce it in our lives. And so one of the things that we promised to do was to have a raffle for those people that had signed up. And here they are. And after we do that, during coffee hour or whatever, if you have any takeaways, let me or Donna know, and things that came to you during the month and tips that we might send out to the congregation. All right, Lee?
Super.
Well, Sharon is going to draw our first number, and if you are here, please come up and take your basket. Number 17 is Karen Sankey.
Oh, Karen's remote. Karen, you've won. Come by the office and get your basket sometime.
Okay. Our
Somebody
second number.
nice number. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Cindy Ladd Fiorini.
Oh, the fix is in. The fix is in.
Okay. Eleanor McGonigal.
Eleanor. Is Eleanor in the house? Come on up and get your basket. This is kind of exciting. Could we have a raffle every Sunday? I kind of like this. And while maybe you could go to the next one as you're, in the interest of time, as Eleanor is making her way.
Oh, okay. Well, we had a few things left over, and we made a small basket. So this is for this small basket now.
Eleanor gets the larger basket, though, correct? Want to differentiate here. Super. Congratulations. Number 7 has
Lois Wood.
Lois. Is Lois? Maybe Lois is remote.
Okay.
All right. Super. Thank you. What a great effort. Great effort. Thank you all. And now I invite Jim Hamilton to come forward and talk about something that we are really excited about. Haven't done this for a couple of years, Jim.
So just a sec, I need to get fully dressed up here.
Oh, he's got one of those hats that Emil used to knit.
So it is holiday fair time. We actually have some posters. You'll see them. They're actually in the table. They're on the table in the parlor right now, along with some gift boxes, which are giving us the idea of how do we wrap up some of the things that people take away. So some neat stuff going on there. I'm working on getting an ad into the Duxbury Clipper, and we'll see how that goes. But anyway, I'm Jim Hamilton. I'm here to talk about the holiday fair. It is December 4th from 9 to 2 p.m. So that's only about 2 weeks away. It's one of our major fundraisers this year, and as the chair of the fair, I'm counting on you to help in any way that you can. Today at coffee hour, we'll have volunteer sign-up sheets for 5 areas of the fair: greens, Mrs. Kringle, silent auction, bake table, and setup cleanup. So our plan is to hold the event in the assembly hall and the parlor. We'll not have the regular lunch cafe that we normally do, again, sort of COVID restrictions. But we are planning on using the parlor for our silent auction. Everyone will be required to wear a mask, the windows will be cracked open, and we will limit the number of people entering. So we understand that this is an unusual year, and not everyone is comfortable meeting in person. That being said, there are things that you can do even if you can't work on site that day, the day of the fair. Here are a couple of ideas. So prepare baked goods, jams, chutneys, and other treats. We know that pies sell very well. Donate items of $20 or more in value to our silent auction, such as things you might want to re-gift, handcrafted items, sporting event or concert tickets, gift cards, theme baskets, use of a vacation property, and other items that folks will be excited to bid on. We're also looking for small holiday items, candles, ornaments, or anything you want to re-gift. That would be for Mrs. Kringle's. Holiday-themed jewelry, always a big hit. We'll have a clearly marked box near the office the week of the fair. And given that some of our regular fair volunteers cannot be present in person this year, we are particularly in need of folks who can volunteer time for setup or to work the day of the fair. Have you ever worked with Sharon Nabreski helping craft holiday arrangements and wreaths? Those folks are wild about greens. It's unbelievable. But they can always use an extra hand. We need volunteers for Mrs. Kringle and the bake table, so I urge you to sign up. Again, sign-up sheets will be out in the tent. There's even a sign-up sheet online. You can find that link in our most recent e-distro, and just contact me or any of the members of the Pandemic Fundraising Working Group. That's me, Sharon Nabreski, Pat Slechta, Tracy Wagner, and Jay Bray. Now, in closing, many of you will recognize the bright hat and scarf I'm wearing as the work of Emil McCrillis, who in such a dedicated fashion supported our youth for many, many years through her work with the religious education program. Now, I've been thinking a lot about Emil recently. You know, she died a few weeks back, and I'm hoping that we can bring some of Emil's can-do spirit to this year's holiday fair. What do you say? When we work together, we can do some amazing things. So thank you very much.
Great.
And if I could say one other thing about something people may not be as excited about, but we'll see. This is the Meet with the Board Sunday. So after church, if you're online, Lester Lloyd will be in the main room. So stay in the main room if you want to chat with Lester, any questions you have for the governing board. And Cindy Ladfiorini will be out in the tent, and you can ask her or any of the board members who are out there as well. So I think that's good.
That's great, thank you. And I did run into Emil's daughter this week, and we were planning a celebration of life when I returned from sabbatical. So this is also the one Sunday every month when we share our plate, and I invite Cindy Wilson to come forward and tell us about our recipient organization.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody. I'm Cindy Wilson, and I'm here again to talk to you about Guests at Your Table. Throughout the year, our church members and friends give donations to a variety of local charities and nonprofits. Giving locally is important, and there are many worthwhile local organizations that we enjoy supporting. However, this time of year, we take a look at how we can raise support for and awareness about human rights issues in the greater world. We do this through our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, or UUSC. UUSC works in more than 20 countries with over 60 grassroots organizations. Thousands of individuals participate in and benefit from UUSC programs. What I like about UUSC is that, unlike some organizations I give to that decide top-down what is best for communities in need, UUSC works with the grassroots leaders in communities most impacted by injustices and supports their ideas for transformational change. This is courageous change, trusting that local people know best what they need. Courageous change is this year's Guest at Your Table's theme. Courageous change happens in the Midwest US, where a partner supports the rights of migrant and refugee workers facing unjust conditions in meat processing plants. Courageous change happens in Burma when a survivor of past military violence amplifies the voices of Burmese ethnic minorities facing military brutality today. Courageous change happens in northern Nicaragua when a partner helps to revolutionize farming practices or speaks on behalf of gender justice. And courageous change happens on Kiowa Island in the Pacific when partners work along with the community to secure a resilient future in the face of climate change. I invite you to visit the UUSC website, where you can access a variety of videos about the communities being supported. You can also learn how your giving dollar is stretched. For instance, $40 covers the cost of 1 month of utilities for a refugee community center in Malaysia. $200 provides 1 month's salary for a teacher in a refugee camp in Bangladesh. And $500 supports the planting of mangrove nurseries to promote resilience to climate change in the Solomon Islands. Guest at Your Table is here, and it needs your support. As we have done for several years, Share the Plate contributions in November have gone to Guest at Your Table, or UUSC. If you want to contribute by check, please make it out to UUSC, put it in today's plate, however we're doing that, and or you can send it to the church office. It's important that you make the check out to UUSC and not First Parish Church, because any gift over $150 given will be matched by the Shelter Church in New York City. If you prefer to donate online, you can go right to UUSC, uusc.org/give-to-guest. There has never been a better time to give, nor has there ever been a greater need. I ask you to give generously. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I think it's really a bit of grace that our first in-house offering since March of 2020 is for UUSC. And we have our offertory baskets here. We're going to give them a go. The concept is so that you don't really have to reach over one another and get any closer than you would like to with COVID protocols. And our ushers will put the baskets into the pew boxes and take them back. So as Cindy said today, we are sharing all of our plate with UUSC. This is something that we do once a month. Our entire non-pledge collection goes to a charity or justice organization, and we're so excited that UUSC and Guest at Your Table is the recipient. As I say, this is the first time since March of 2020 that we're taking an in-house collection. So as Cindy said, you can make out a check today and be sure and make it out to UUSC. You can place it in these wonderful, attractive little collection baskets that we have now. You can, there'll be a basket at the exit, in the back here. As you go to coffee hour, you can place it there, or you can donate directly to the UUSC website, and they will ask you for your congregation, so we will still get credit for that. And as Cindy said, any donation over $150 is being matched by our Shelter Rock congregation. So let's all take in this amazing opportunity to be together in our first offering since March 2020. Give generously and be blessed. So this Sunday is just packed with exciting things. This is also a Sunday where our diverse music team has put together a beautiful music offering for us. So I invite Selden to come up and talk about it.
Good morning. The Diverse Music Committee was formed last year to help bring new and varied music once a month to our Sunday worship services. This month, we are happy to present Indigenous music courtesy of Ken Langer, who based his piece on the words of an Oglala Lakota holy man and healer, Black Elk. Black Elk lived most of his long life, from 1863 to 1950, in South Dakota. He was involved in some of the most famous events in the American West, most notably the Battle at Wounded Knee, late in 1890. Black Elk himself survived, but hundreds of largely unarmed Lakota men, women, and children were slaughtered at the hands of U.S. soldiers. Black Elk has come to symbolize courage and wisdom, and his teachings continue to serve as a bridge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. Ken Langer is a composer, conductor, writer, music educator, and a UU seminary student. The video he has created at the request of the Diversity in Music Committee is based on the words of Black Elk. Since there's an overlay or round after the initial verse, and it's a little difficult to interpret what it means and what you're hearing, I'm going to read the lyrics now before we show the video. Peace is. Peace comes from oneness, O Great Spirit. Oneness dwells at the center, O Great Spirit. The center is found everywhere, O Great Spirit. The center is in every heart. Find a sacred peace.
Peace comes from oneness, O Great Spirit. Oneness dwells at the center, O Great Spirit. The center is found everywhere, O Great Spirit. The center is in every heart. Find the sacred peace. Peace comes from
Thank you, diverse music team. That was really beautiful. And Ken is a friend of the Rob, your sabbatical minister, so you may be seeing more of Ken over the winter months. I now invite Carrie Meyer to come forward and tell us a little bit about our land acknowledgement initiative.
Good morning. This morning's service, in part, inaugurates a process which may culminate in the adoption of a land acknowledgement by the congregation. Our land acknowledgement will be a recognition of the whole story of the human habitation of the lands on which this congregation lives. Throughout this year, we will explore with the governing board and church committees what actions such a land acknowledgement calls upon us to take. To start our recognition of the Native people who lived here, and at a time of thankfulness for the gifts of the earth, I will read a Native American song praising the beauty of their blossoming plants, the corn and the beans. The Hiya Casino song. Corn blossom maidens here in the fields, patches of beans in flower, fields all abloom, water shining after rain, blue clouds looming above. Now behold, through the bright cluster of flowers, yellow butterflies are chasing at play. Now behold, through the blossoming beans, blue butterflies are there chasing at play. Thank you.
Very beautiful. In the interest of time, I invite us to offer gratitude and think about something for which we are grateful for this year. We're going to spend a moment or two in silence, but we will not light our candles. So let's take a moment or two in shared silence, and I invite you to think about one or two things that you're really grateful for this year, this Thanksgiving. Amen. My spiritual friends, in a few days, most of us will be gathered around a table of some sort with family and friends. And when we think of Thanksgiving, we think of the story that we learned from childhood. Most of us learned this Thanksgiving story in school, the story that involves our pilgrim ancestors, the ancestors of this congregation. This congregation was, of course, gathered in 1632. We were the first congregation to split from the Pilgrims at Plymouth. Our pilgrim ancestors who gathered this community had taken part in the celebration that we now call Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims' three-day feast in early November of 1621. Our pilgrim forebears did indeed have a difficult first year in the New World. 102 hardy souls had left their native country and arrived as strangers in this strange world. They spent a lonely, fearful first winter, freezing, dying. They buried nearly half of their number by that first Thanksgiving Day. But through hard work and with the help of the local Native Americans, the Pilgrims reaped a rich harvest in the summer of 1621. The leaders of the young colony, William Bradford and Edward Winslow, wrote in their diaries as follows. They began now to gather in ye small harvest they had, and to fit up their houses and dwellings against the winter, being well recovered in health and strength, and had all things in good plenty. And to celebrate the all things in good plenty, the Pilgrims, as I said, declared a three-day feast in November. 50 Pilgrims and 90 Wampanoag joined together for a feast of lobster, turkey, deer, cornbread, and berries. The celebration also included prayers of thanksgiving. One of the Pilgrims, Edward Winslow, wrote to friends in Europe. This is what he said. And God be praised, we had a good increase. Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men on fowling, that so we might after a special manner rejoice together after we had gathered the fruit of our labors. They 4 in one day killed as much fowl as, with a little help besides, served the company almost for a week. At which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms. Many of the Indians coming amongst us, and among the rest, their greatest king, Massasoit, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted. And they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it not be always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God, we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty. He's writing back to his friends back in England. My spiritual friends, this is the Thanksgiving story that we all know, the story that our history classes taught us. But there is another part of the Thanksgiving story, and that story is told in the voice of the Wampanoag. That story is told in the memory of our Native sisters and brothers. And the commemoration that accompanies that story is not a day of Thanksgiving, but a day of mourning. The American Thanksgiving story that's been historically promoted is a version that glorifies the relationship of the colonizers and the Wampanoag. But let's take a closer look at that story. The Pilgrims did indeed show great bravery. They were persecuted in their homeland for wanting their own independent church and not worshiping the Church of England. They moved to Holland, where they were somewhat tolerated religiously, but they did not want their children to grow up Dutch. And so in 1620, they crossed the dangerous Atlantic Ocean in that tiny ship, the Mayflower. They first landed at the tip of Cape Cod, and then they settled down and established the settlement at Plymouth. They did have a terrible first winter, digging more graves than the number of homes that they built. But when spring came, Squanto, an English-speaking Wampanoag, taught them how to grow corn. The English had brought wheat seeds with them, and wheat doesn't grow as well in this area, so Squanto taught them how to grow corn. And he also showed them how to build wigwam houses, how to use plants as medicine, how to get sap from trees, and how to use fish for fertilizer. He also shared his favorite fishing holes for eel and other sorts of fish. Thanks in large part to Squanto and his help, by that harvest time in 1621, the Pilgrims had enough food and shelter. They had allies and access to natural resources, and the sickness that had killed so many of them the winter before had passed, so they were ready to give thanks. At that first Thanksgiving, the English tradition of harvest home festivals kind of met the Wampanoag custom of celebrating times of abundance. The Pilgrims did invite Massasoit, the leader of the Wampanoag, and his people to the festival. And the friendly natives brought venison. You heard they brought venison, and the story goes that the Pilgrims provided the beer, and everyone ate their fill, and they had a good time. The Pilgrims were not the first to make contact with the Wampanoag. The Atlantic coast was well known to English seamen, who beginning in the 1500s kind of traveled up and down the coast seeking to trade for furs. I remember as a child learning about the fur traders, but I never learned this part of the story. I never learned that the English seamen would trick indigenous people onto their ships and take them as slaves and bring them into the Caribbean or Spain or even back to England. As a kid, I never wondered how Squanto knew how to speak English, but that's how he did. He had been kidnapped and enslaved by the English. He'd been taken to Europe for several years as a prisoner and a slave, and had only recently returned to North America. And when Squanto returned to Massachusetts, he discovered that his own village had been wiped out the year before by an epidemic, probably smallpox. All of his family and friends were dead, his village was gone, and the Pilgrims were living in his village. Another part of the story is about the epidemic that killed Squanto's family. The epidemic had been introduced by an English fisherman, they say, who brought the disease, and the indigenous folks had no immunity. And between the 3 years before the Pilgrims arrived, the epidemic killed 90 to 95% of the Wampanoag along the coast. 90 to 95%. When the Mayflower landed, the Pilgrims settled on the site of the Pawtuxet village, Squanto's village. That village had been wiped out by disease. So the Pilgrims essentially arrived to a ready-made village, already cleared land, and a clean source of water. And it says in some history accounts that King James and the early Pilgrim leaders gave thanks for the epidemic and the plagues that affected the Wampanoag, because that ready-made settlement was proof to the English that God was on their side. And that's another part of the story. The fact that our Pilgrim forebears believed that God was on their side can be traced to that 15th century doctrine of discovery. We spoke about that at one point recently. This doctrine essentially deputized European colonizers to claim any land and the people on that land for this purpose, so that and this I quote, this is actually part of the doctrine, so that the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, and that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. So my friends, our pilgrim forebears brought with them this assumption of divine right to the land and domination over its original inhabitants. So here we have on that first Thanksgiving, the colonizing pilgrims who were anointed by God, and the Wampanoag, a tribe that had lived on this land for over 12,000 years, but had been greatly diminished by a recent epidemic, and was now being threatened by neighboring Narragansetts, who for some reason were not susceptible to the epidemic. And so it was that the Wampanoag made a fateful decision. Their leader, Massasoit, decided to offer an alliance with the English to help protect his people from the Narragansett. The English accepted, and the two offered mutual support, and it worked out for a while. Massasoit did protect his people in the short term, but over time, they lost most of their tribal lands as more and more white settlers arrived in Plymouth Colony. We've all heard of King Philip's War, I'm sure. The result was the native population, with its lands disappearing, tried to fight back, but it was too late. Most of the indigenous folks left this area at that time for Canada or further west, and only this tiny band of Wampanoags remained. Fast forward to the 20th century. Inspired by the civil rights movements of the 60s, many tribes sought to reclaim their rights to land that they had actually inhabited for millennia. After an arduous process that lasted more than 3 decades, the Mashpee Wampanoag were finally re-acknowledged as a federally recognized tribe in 2007. Took that long. The Bureau of Indian Affairs declared the tribe had finally met the strict requirements. Number one, they were able to prove that they operated as a community since pre-colonial times. Hey, we all know the Thanksgiving story. That should have been really easy to prove. And the second thing that they were able to prove was that 97% of their members were directly descended from the historical tribe. So now that they're federally recognized, in 2015, the Obama administration designated about 130 acres of land in trust as what was called the Mashpee Wampanoag Reservation, 60 acres in Mashpee and 70 acres in Taunton. But in 2018, the Interior Department reversed the earlier decision on the grounds that the Mashpee tribe was not under federal jurisdiction when Congress passed the Indian Reorganization Act in 1934. They hadn't been recognized, so they were not. That's what we lawyers call a little technicality. That's when our Congressman Bill Keating stepped in. In early 2019, he introduced what's called the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe Reservation Reaffirmation Act. This was a bid to get Congress to finally recognize and protect the Mashpee homelands. In May 2019, just before the bill was going to come up for vote in the House of Representatives, then sitting President Donald Trump tweeted his opposition to what he called a special interest casino bill. And Congressman Keating shot back in another tweet of his own, essentially accusing the president of acting in his own interests. Keating said, "Why tweet against a bill recognizing the tribe of the first Thanksgiving? Maybe it's because of your well-documented alliance with a Rhode Island casino lobbyist." And the situation continued to get worse for the Wampanoag. On March 27, 2020, the Trump administration tried another tack. In the midst of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, the chair of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe was informed one morning by the Bureau of Indian Affairs that the tribe's reservation would be disestablished. This was the first time native land had been taken out of trust and disestablished since the termination era of the 1940s, when the US government intentionally attempted to assimilate Native Americans into the broader culture. The Mashpee Wampanoag, the people of the First Light, who had occupied the same land for over 12,000 years, the very tribe that welcomed the Pilgrims in 1620 and taught them skills that allowed them to survive, continues to be at risk of losing what's left of their homelands. In the words of the current tribal chair, the steps being taken right now in the middle of a nationwide pandemic to disestablish our reservation and take our land out of trust has created a crisis on top of a crisis. Our land is sacred. It's where our people receive their health services. It's where our children attend language immersion school. It's where we are building houses for our citizens. Taking our land is a direct attack on our culture and our way of living. We now have no choice but to divert precious resources from COVID-19 to address this unwarranted attack on our sovereignty. The Bureau action was eventually reversed by a US District Court ruling, and President Biden is seen as perhaps a better ally for the Wampanoag. He actually mentioned the Mashpee tribe during the election, saying that they had been treated unfairly and they deserved their land protected in trust. And then, of course, he nominated Deb Haaland to the Secretary of Interior, the first Native American cabinet member in our history. And Native American tribes all across the country celebrated her appointment, saying it represented at last a great hope for Indian country. But now it's almost been a year since Biden took office, and the Mashpee tribe are still in the same place. Right now, it's in the Biden administration's court to submit a ruling to a federal judge, basically saying whether the tribe's land should be in trust or not. And just this week, frustration grew for the Mashpee. A few days ago, Secretary Haaland was on the Cape for the Vineyard Wind groundbreaking, and she didn't even meet with the Mashpee tribe. The tribal chair called it a slap in the face. He said it's customary for Native Americans to pay their respects to another tribe when they visit the area, and it's a sign of disrespect not to at least give that acknowledgement. Haaland could not be reached for comment. I suppose on the grand scale of national politics, the Mashpee tribe might be somewhat small compared to massive infrastructure bills that recently passed or economic policy as the country emerges from the pandemic. But the Mashpee tribal chair says that he's going to use every opportunity he finds to pressure the federal government into protecting his tribe's land. And this Vineyard Wind groundbreaking was a good opportunity that was missed. Also, with President Biden coming to Nantucket for Thanksgiving, the chair has invited Biden to pay a visit to Mashpee, giving the administration another chance to meet the Native tribe on tribal lands. We'll see. My spiritual friends, for 4 decades after the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag and the colonizers lived in peace. But in the words of Mashpee Vice Chair Jessie Little Doe Baird, our tenure and sovereignty have been under attack ever since. She writes, history wants us to believe that the Indian was savage, illiterate, an uncivilized animal, a history that was written by an organized, disciplined people to expose us as unorganized and undisciplined. 2 distinctly different cultures met. One thought they must control life. The other believed that life was to be enjoyed because nature had decreed it. My spiritual friends, our American Thanksgiving story, the story of the Indians who came to dinner, was one of the founding stories of our nation. But those Thanksgiving pilgrims were not simply innocent settlers setting up a camp in the wilderness, as they like to call it. There was no wilderness. There was no new world. Native people inhabited this area for over 12,000 years. When the pilgrims arrived, the natives had 20 villages, permanent villages, not teepees. And each village had its own leader, and as was the practice in the native circles, political power flowed upward. The people chose their moderators or sachems. And these first people had a very particular spiritual lens. They looked at the world, the cosmos, as creative and sustaining. The earth and the sky were them. The earth did not belong to them, they belonged to the earth. The Thanksgiving pilgrims, on the other hand, they aimed for domination and conquest. After all, God had given them dominion over earth and all her creatures. And identifying the area where they settled as a wilderness had a purpose. My friends, this Thanksgiving, may we remember that if we are ever to live in harmony, in balance with the earth and all our relations, we must acknowledge our history, all of it. We must make amends where we can, begin again in greater understanding where we can, and give proper place and agency to all our relations. My friends, it matters that we see our Indigenous neighbors. It matters that we call them by their own names. It matters that we validate their experience of colonization. We are not responsible for colonization, but we are beneficiaries of that process. And we are responsible for what we do now. And I happen to believe that arriving at an appropriate land acknowledgement that we can incorporate into our common life here at First Parish is a strong first step. After all, we are the first parish. In closing, I'd like to say a little bit of the land acknowledgement that the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society offers. It's in your insert, and I simply love it. Think about how you'd feel if we said this as we gathered for worship each Sunday, if you heard these words. We want to acknowledge that Duxbury is located on the traditional lands of the Wampanoag and the Massachusetts. These tribal nations inhabited this territory through various times in history, have a 12,000-year history of lasting connections to and stewardship of the unceded lands and waterways. They have endured a painful history of genocide, colonization, and historical misinformation, but they survive and flourish today, as is evident by their descendants. This acknowledgement statement is a simple but powerful way to show respect and a step towards correcting the stories that have erased Native American history, culture, and ancestral homes in Duxbury and across the region. It's a way to give honor to these tribal nations, past and present, and a voice to their truth, their resilience, reciprocity, and sustainability. Let this land acknowledgement be an opening for all to contemplate a way to join the Native American struggle against systems of suppression. My friends, from their lips to God's ears. Amen.
God
strong enough for all of us. Thank you so much for the gift of your music today. My friends, until yeah. Woo-hoo. Thank goodness we have you. We can't sing together yet. Until we meet again, may you be blessed. Now go be a blessing to the world and have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday.